Hello, John Kelly from Web Support back again with tutorial number 5, and in this one we're going to talk about some advanced editor techniques. There's things that we want to know about that editor that tend to get us in trouble when something happens, something moves around, we don't understand why it did what it did. Well, I'm going to try to answer as many of those questions as possible. So I just logged into my dashboard and I'm going to go to a page that I want to edit. And we've been working on the home page for a little while, but for right now I think what we're going to do is we're going to go to I think we're going to go to our services page, and on our services page we can see this what this would look like in the front end just by clicking on the preview changes. And right now we just have some generic content in there, contact us via email link, etc. Looks a little on the bland side, but we can style this up a little bit. Okay, so in our editor, this is what's called a WYSIWYG editor, or what you see is what you get, is what WYSIWYG stands for. And there are two tabs that are on this editor. One is called Visual, one is called HTML. Now, HTML simply stands for a hypertext markup language. What that means is code. That is the code that actually gives this text its font, its color, its style, etc., that is presented in the code itself. Now, you don't see that on the front end of a website, but that is what a web browser sees and knows how to render this content. You can actually see that, and if you do know HTML, it's a good place to go and work with your content. Now, chances are you're not going to be in here a whole lot, but what I want to do is just show you some stuff that's in here so you understand what's going to take place later. So clicking on the HTML tab, you notice that your menu up here has changed because it's meant more for HTML stuff. The thing I want to draw your attention to is notice that you see characters in here that are encased in greater than and less than signs, have a slash in front of them, etc. Any one of these that you see that has a greater than or less than sign, such as this is actually HTML for a link, okay, that takes us to the contact page. That is code, that is HTML. So when we go to the front end, we don't see all that. We just see what it represents. Okay, so that's the difference between the two tabs. Now, why is this important? Well, because sometimes you're going to need to switch over to the HTML tab to correct a problem that you can't correct on the visual side, such as when you have an extra space in there. Okay, so let me show you an example of that. If I go into here and let's say that I want to make an extra space between here and women's haircuts, when I press the enter button, that just created a space here for me. Now you can't see it here, but when I go to the HTML tab, notice what it did to create that space. It made some extra code just to be able to do that. P, by the way, stands for paragraph. BR stands for break. Okay, so class is the definition of that BR tag, etc. So anything that ends with a slash means it's closing that HTML tag. So every HTML tag opens and then it closes again in order for it to work properly. Now, you don't need to remember all that stuff, but I want you to know is that I went after contact email up here and I clicked enter, and this is what it made. So if you have an extra space there, you could say, well, yeah, can I just go here and hit delete? Yep, you can do that. Okay, but sometimes you may have a space that you don't know why it's there. So what I'm trying to show you is that you can go to the HTML tab and look and see what is in there, and is it necessary, can I get rid of it or not. Okay, because sometimes you get a whole bunch of what's called markup language in there because you're in a process of making stuff bold, you're making it italic, maybe you've changed the color, etc. But what I want to show you, what I just did there, made that bold italic and changed it to gray. Look at how much code it takes to make that happen. So strong, meaning bold. EM stands for italic. Span says, okay, I'm going to change the color to that hexadecimal number, and variety of services is what's going to change, and then all those tags are closed again before the next word comes up. Okay, so if you're trying to figure out what's wrong, you may need to go into the code and you may need to actually clean it up a little bit. Okay. Now another way to do that is simply do this. If you're on this page and you haven't published it yet, you can simply click on the undo button, and that will take you back all the different steps that you've done so far. So you notice I've taken it back to bold. I can take it back one more, and now I go back to normal. So when I go back to the HTML tab, all that's cleaned up. Okay, so these are some little tips I want to show you about using the HTML editor and using the visual tab. Okay, now with that in mind, sometimes you're gonna have a problem where actually let me go back a little bit before I talk about a problem. Let's say that perhaps you put in a name of something and maybe you need it uppercase or lowercase. Well, let's just say that you put a name in there like McDonald's or something, and you want to put a trademark or something like that after that. So if you put in TM, oops, and you want to make that an uppercase, then there's a button up here. If you notice, it says superscript or subscript. If I click on superscript, notice what it did. Automatically made that a trademark for me. Okay, so that's how you can change that. And you notice what I did, I just hit the undo buttons and brought me back. Okay, another thing I wanted to talk to you about as a problem. I want you to be well aware of a tool that's built into this. One, we have the change of font size from 1 to 5, and 5 meaning it would be the biggest. So if I want to take this word of variety and I want to change its font size, I highlight it, I click on, let's say 5, and you notice how big it made it. Okay, now that's all well and good, but sometimes people make the mistakes make the mistake of taking that word, highlighting it, and going up here to where it says paragraph. Paragraph means the normal font that this should render under. What you don't want to do is go down here to make it big and call it heading 1 or heading 2. Now I know I used that as an example in a prior video, okay, but the reason I did that was a lot different than why we're doing it now. Okay, but for right now, I just want you to understand that, you know, in order to do things properly moving forward, when you create content on your web page, that search engines look at that content. They want to know if it's a paragraph. They want to know if it's a heading. And if it's a heading, they want to know if the content underneath of it makes sense. So if you turn that into a heading, as I just did this whole page here, and I go and preview that change, I just turned that into a number 1, what's called an H1 heading. Search engine says, well, this must be important text. There must be text underneath explaining what that heading is about. You don't want to do that. Okay, this is what my point is. We don't want to do that. The only time you should ever have a heading, and by the way, up here, anytime you make a new page or you have a page title, that is already an H1 heading tag. That's already this thing. We've built that into the website for you. So anything that you put down here, you can have subheadings of. So maybe you want to say my salon, or the name of your salon perhaps would be better. And if you want that to be as we'll call that a heading 2, because that will follow the hierarchy of a heading 1. That's fine. You can do that, and you can center that, and you can change its color, you can italic, anything you want to do with that, that's fine. Because when I go over to the HTML tab, notice what it did. It put the heading tags to tell me what that word was, and that's important to a search engine. So bottom line is, when you're going to change the size of a font, use the font size, not this. Okay, this is only to make something either a paragraph or a heading in order. It's a very, very important thing. It can really mess up your content when it comes to search engines. Alright, so if I go and I preview my change here, take a look at what it did. Automatically, now you notice in the editor it was left aligned. Okay, but we have it set up so whenever you put a heading in, it's going to automatically center it. If you had centered it in the back end, that's okay. It would still be centered here, so it doesn't make a difference. Okay. So that is a couple of the most important things that you need to know about when you're using your editor, is understanding spaces, understanding what HTML is. Now there is other HTML characters that you will see from time to time, and they are brackets. So you might see stuff in here. Remember the YouTube example? We had YouTube, then we had a whole bunch of code, and then after that we had more YouTube. Close YouTube. Okay, you might see other things on your website. It may say form in the middle here, or map. Okay, do not edit and delete those things. They are important. If you do, no problem, I'll fix it for you, but don't go in and delete them and move them out of your way, because they do mean something. So most of the time you're going to stick here on your visual tab. You're going to go in and type and do everything that you want to do. By the way, you also notice that the font that you see here is not the same style font that you see on the front of the website. Reason being is because, like this was centered, we have that preset. We have the font preset to render under this font as well, which is either Arial or Helvetica, I believe, one of the two. Now, we don't want to have an option where you can change the font to different styles. The reason being is some browsers, or actually I should say all browsers, do not render all different fonts properly. Okay, and they may come up looking like some foreign Asian language or something if it's not correct. So believe me, there's a reason why the fonts are on your site the way they are, and why you don't have the option to change the font type. Okay, we don't want you to do that because they don't render properly on certain browsers. Okay, so that's going to wrap up our video here about some special little techniques of using the editor. And when we get back to blogging, we're going to talk about more about the editor in a little while. So I'll see you soon.